Look, I've never been great at telling stories. That I stumble over my words, I forget the important details, I get the order of events all mixed up. But this thing that happened up in Duluth last October, it's burned into my brain with a terrifying, perfect clarity. I need to get it out. I need to tell someone, even if it sounds insane. It started like a lot of bad ideas do, with a girl. Her name was Chloe. Chloe with a soft, whispery C, and a smile that could short-circuit a city block. We weren't dating, not really. We worked together at a bland, beige tech consultancy in Minneapolis, and we'd fallen into this easy, flirty rhythm of shared lunches and after-work drinks. She was from California originally, all sun-bleached hair and a kind of effortless cool that felt alien and intoxicating to a Minnesota native like me. I'd been nursing a serious, pathetic crush on her for months. This particular weekend, she'd mentioned she'd never seen the North Shore in the fall. "The leaves are supposed to be like insane, right?" she'd said, leaning over my cubicle wall. I could smell her perfume, something clean and citrusy. Her top was a soft, cream-colored cashmere sweater that clung to her in a way that made it impossible to look anywhere else. I watched the way the fabric stretched across her shoulders, the delicate line of her collarbone, the way her breasts moved just slightly when she breathed. It was a stupid, intrusive thought to have at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning, but I had it anyway. I was always having them around her. So I, of course, immediately volunteered to be her tour guide. "It's peak season," I said, trying to sound casual, "but my uncle has a cabin outside Duluth he never uses, place called Knife River. Right on the lake. We could crash there." Her eyes lit up. "Seriously? That would be amazing." And just like that, it was planned. A weekend trip. Just the two of us. My heart did a weird, hopeful thump against my ribs. Maybe this was it. Maybe the scenic overlooks and the cozy cabin would be the setting for something more than just friendly sightseeing. The drive up I-35 was beautiful, all blazing red maples and golden aspens. Chloe rolled down the window, letting the crisp, cold air whip through the car. She kicked off her sneakers and tucked her feet up on the seat, her jeans pulling tight across her thighs. Her socks were a ridiculous neon pink. I found myself staring at the curve of her calf, the delicate bones of her ankle. It was a nervous habit, I think. Focusing on something physical, something simple, to keep from spiraling into my own pet. We got to the cabin as the sun was beginning to dip below the tree line, painting Lake Superior in shades of fire and bruised purple. The place was exactly as I remembered it from childhood summers. A little A-frame with dark wood paneling, a stone fireplace, and that distinct, damp lumber smell that old lake houses have. It was charming in a rustic, slightly neglected way. "Oh my God, it's perfect," Chloe breathed, hopping out of the car and hugging herself against the chill coming off the water. The wind caught her hair, swirling it around her face. She looked incredible standing there, a splash of California vibrancy against the stark, gray north. I grabbed our bags from the trunk, my fingers brushing against hers as I handed her the duffel. A little jolt, entirely manufactured by my own hopeless imagination, shot up my arm. We got a fire going, opened a bottle of wine, and made a simple pasta dinner. The conversation was easy, familiar. We talked about work, about stupid clients, about movies we'd seen. But there was a new charge in the air, a tension that hadn't been there in the office. It felt like we were playing house. Every time she laughed, a low, throaty sound, I felt it in my gut. Every time she leaned forward to pour more wine, the neck of her sweater gaped open, and I'd catch a fleeting, guilty glimpse of the smooth skin of her chest. I was hyper-aware of her, of the small space between us on the worn leather couch. The desire was a low hum in the background of everything, a persistent, distracting static. It was around 10 o'clock when the first weird thing happened. We were just sitting there, the fire crackling, a comfortable silence settling over us. My phone, sitting on the coffee table, suddenly emitted a harsh, blaring screech, the emergency alert sound. We both jumped. "Jesus," Chloe laughed, a hand on her chest. "What the hell is that? Tornado?" I picked up the phone. The screen was lit up with the standard emergency broadcast banner, stark white letters on a black background. "No, it's just the weather," I said, squinting at it. Weirdly specific, though. I read it aloud. National Weather Service Duluth MN. Issued 9:58 p.m. Central Daylight Time OCT 14. For Knife River to French River. Clear skies. Winds calm. Temperature 42 degrees. Visibility unlimited. Conditions TO persist until 10:04 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Chloe frowned. That's it? They send an emergency alert for that? Hey, it's nice out? I shrugged. Glitch in the matrix, I guess. Lake effect weather does weird things. They're probably testing the system. It was odd, but not alarming. We shrugged it off and went back to our wine. About an hour later, I went out onto the deck to get more firewood from the stack. The night was absolutely still and silent, the kind of deep quiet you only get miles from a city. The lake was a vast black void. The only light came from a crescent moon and the spill of warmth from the cabin windows. As I bent to grab a log, a movement caught my eye down by the water's edge. There was a man standing there. He was just a silhouette against the faint shimmer of the lake, tall and unnaturally still. He wasn't dressed for the weather. Just a dark jacket, no hat, hands shoved in his pockets. He seemed to be looking directly at the cabin. Me a cold prickle, entirely separate from the night air, ran down my spine. It was probably just a neighbor out for a walk, I told myself. But the road was a good quarter-mile away through thick woods. There were no other lights visible. What was he doing down there on our private stretch of rocky beach? I stood up slowly, the firewood forgotten in my hands. I squinted, trying to make out any details, but he was just a shape, a cutout of a man against the darkness. We stood like that for a long moment, two figures frozen in a silent tableau. Then, without any discernible movement, he was just gone. Not like he walked away. 1 second he was there, solid and real, and the next, the space where he'd been was empty. I blinked, my heart starting to hammer. Had I imagined it? The wine, the late hour, the play of moonlight on the water. It could have been a trick of the light. A shadow from a tree. I stood there for another full minute, staring into the nothingness, but nothing moved. The only sound was the gentle lap of water on stone. I hurried back inside, latching the door firmly behind me. You okay? Chloe asked. She was curled on the couch, looking sleepy and content. You look like you saw a ghost. Nah, I said, forcing a laugh that came out too high. Just cold, thought I saw a deer down by the water. The lie felt flimsy on my tongue. I didn't want to freak her out, to be the guy who gets spooked by shadows and ruins the vibe. I stoked the fire, adding more logs than necessary, trying to shake off the chill that had settled deep in my bones. The next day was bright and sunny, the strange events of the night before fading in the hard, clear light of day. We drove up the shore to Gooseberry Falls, hiked the trails, and took the obligatory photos. Chloe was in her element, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold, her laughter echoing off the canyon walls. I was trying to be present, to enjoy this, but my mind kept drifting back to the figure on the beach. It had felt so real. My distraction must have been obvious. As we were walking back to the car, the path wide and paved, Chloe slipped her hand into mine. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. You've been quiet today, she said, giving my hand a little squeeze. Everything cool? Her touch sent a fresh wave of that confusing desire through me, momentarily overriding the unease. I looked at her, at the way her hair was escaping from her beanie, at the tiny flecks of gold in her green eyes. I wanted to kiss her right there. Instead, I just squeezed her hand back. Yeah, I said, just a lot on my mind. It was a pathetic, non-committal answer. She smiled, a knowing, flirtatious little twist of her lips. Well, stop thinking so much. She let go of my hand and gave me a playful shove, her hip brushing against mine. The contact was electric, and for a few seconds, the man on the beach was forgotten. We decided to have dinner at a pub in downtown Duluth, a place with dark wood and nautical junk on the walls. It was crowded and loud, a welcome return to normality. We found a small table near the back and ordered burgers and beers. I was finally starting to relax, to feel like this was just a normal, great date with a beautiful woman. That's when I saw him again. He was sitting alone at the bar, 3 stools down from us, the same dark jacket, the same posture. He was nursing a glass of water, not a beer, and he was staring straight ahead at the row of liquor bottles behind the bar. But I knew with a sickening certainty that he was aware of us. I froze, my pint glass halfway to my mouth. It was him. There was no doubt that he had a sharp, angular face, pale skin, and dark hair that was cut short and neat. That he wasn't old, but he wasn't young either. There was a strange agelessness to him. His features were utterly neutral, devoid of any readable emotion. That he looked empty. "You all right?" Chloe asked, following my gaze. "See someone you know?" "No," I said too quickly that I forced myself to look down at my plate. "No, I just thought I recognized that guy, but I don't." I tried to eat, but my appetite was gone. Every few seconds my eyes would flick back to the bar. That he hadn't moved. That he just sat there, perfectly still, like a mannequin. He wasn't on his phone. That he wasn't reading a paper. That he was just waiting. Chloe, oblivious, was telling a story about a disastrous date she'd once had. That I nodded along, making the right sounds in the right places, but I wasn't hearing a word. That my entire world had shrunk to the space between our table and that bar stool. The noise of the pub seemed to recede, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I had to know. That I had to prove to myself that this was a coincidence, that I was being paranoid. "I'm gonna grab another round," I said, standing up abruptly. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. That I walked toward the bar, my heart thudding against my ribs. That I kept my eyes fixed on the back of his head. That as I got closer, I could see the fabric of his jacket. It was a cheap windbreaker, the kind you buy at a gas station. That I stepped up to the bar, 2 stools away from him. The bartender was down at the other end. That I could feel the man's presence like a physical coldness radiating from him. I cleared my throat. "Hey," I said, slowly, very slowly. He turned his head to look at me. His eyes were the palest blue I had ever seen, almost gray, like chips of ice. They held no curiosity, no friendliness, no hostility, nothing. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was flat, monotone, devoid of any inflection. That it was the voice of a text-to-speech program. My mouth was dry. I thought I saw you last night, out by Knife River. By the lake." He stared at me for a beat too long. The silence stretched, becoming heavy and uncomfortable. The chatter of the pub seemed to mute itself around us. "No," he said simply. Then he turned back to face the bar, dismissing me completely. That I stood there, rooted to the spot, a hot flush of embarrassment and fear washing over me. That he denied it, but the denial felt like a lie. It felt like a game. The bartender came over and I mumbled my beer order, my hands shaking slightly as I pulled out my wallet. That I could feel the man's icy presence beside me, a statue of indifference. When I returned to the table with the drinks, Chloe was watching me, her flirtatious smile replaced by a look of concern. "Everything okay? You're white as a sheet." "Fine," I lied, sliding into my seat. That I took a long pull of my beer, trying to steady my nerves. "Just, that guy was kind of a dick." I risked another glance at the bar. The stool was empty. He was gone. No goodbye to the bartender, no money on the counter. That he just vanished into the crowd. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. That I was on high alert, my head on a swivel, scanning every face that passed by. Every tall man in a dark jacket made my heart skip a beat. Chloe's attempts at conversation became background noise. That I was too busy watching the door, the windows, the spaces between people. We drove back to the cabin in near silence. The playful, charged atmosphere from the morning was completely gone, replaced by a thick, awkward tension. Chloe had given up trying to talk to me. She just stared out the passenger window at the passing darkness, her arms crossed over her chest. That I felt like a total asshole. That I was ruining everything. But the fear was a live wire in my chest, crackling and spitting, overriding everything else. Back at the cabin, I made a show of building another fire, of putting on some music, trying to reset the mood. But it was useless. That I was jumpy, listening for sounds outside, peering out the windows into the impenetrable blackness. "I'm going to take a shower," Chloe said, her tone cool. She gathered her things and disappeared into the small bathroom down the hall. The moment the door clicked shut, the alert on my phone went off again. That same jarring, electronic screech. I snatched it up. National Weather Service, Duluth MN. Issued 10:02 p.m. Central Daylight Time, OCT 15. For Knife River 2 French River. Clear skies. Winds calm. Temperature 41 degrees. Visibility unlimited. Conditions TO persist until 10:08 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Another one. Almost the exact same message, just a few degrees colder. The specificity was maddening. Why? Why broadcast the weather for this tiny, specific stretch of coastline for a 6-minute window? It felt less like a forecast and more like a designator. A marker. I heard the shower turn on down the hall. A few minutes later my phone buzzed again, but this was a different sound. A text message, from an unknown number. The message contained a single image. It was a photo, taken from outside the cabin. It was a shot through the living room window, slightly blurred by the glass and the screen. It showed me from behind, standing right where I was standing now, looking at my phone. The fire was lit. The music was playing. It had been taken within the last 60 seconds. My blood ran cold. I spun around, staring at the black rectangle of the window. I saw only my own reflection, pale and wide-eyed. I rushed over and yanked the curtains shut, my heart hammering against my sternum. I was breathing in short, ragged gasps. Who sent this? Oh, the man from the bar. It had to be. He was out there, right now, watching us. The shower shut off. I stood in the middle of the room, trembling, listening to the faint sounds of Chloe moving around in the bathroom. The normal domestic sounds were suddenly terrifying. She was vulnerable in there, naked. Unaware. A few minutes later the bathroom door opened and she stepped out into the hallway. She was wrapped in a towel, her hair turbaned in another. Her skin was flushed and steaming from the hot water. Droplets of water clung to her shoulders and the smooth, tan skin of her décolletage. The towel was tucked snugly under her arms, but it was short, riding high on her thighs. I could see the powerful muscles of her calves tense as she walked on the cool wooden floor. Ordinarily, the sight would have sent my mind into a tailspin of fantasy. Now, it just filled me with a protective, panicked dread. She was exposed. He was out there. He could be watching right now. The desire and the fear curdled together into a nauseating cocktail in my stomach. "You okay?" she asked, her voice softer now that she'd seen the look on my face. "You've got the curtains closed. Getting cozy?" "Chloe," I said, my voice tight, "we need to lock the doors, all of them." Her playful expression faded. What? What's going on, Mark?" I didn't want to tell her that. I didn't want to sound like a lunatic, but I had to. I showed her my phone, the text message with the photo. Her face went through a rapid series of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, and then, finally, raw fear. Her hand flew.